So now Matthew Stafford has the number one spot with 42 passing touchdowns in a single season for the Los Angeles Rams. Welcome to Just the Stats, NFL Top 10's for Wednesday. My name's Ernie Jennings. I'm your host, and this is the final podcast of 2025 for me. What a journey. I started this way back in the spring with the idea that I just enjoy looking at these stats on the team. So my first podcast, which were just audio, covered every team. I had a podcast for every team, and I went through their top players and top 10 players in every category. Most of the same categories that I use now. Some of those podcasts would be an hour or longer. And that's just all I did was the teams. And then I started picking out things. If you go back, you'll see I did a podcast on, for example, who should have been the MVP last year. And I did different podcasts. I just kind of found different things that related to stats, giving stats one way or the other. Looked at some of the rookies and so forth. And it kept tinkering with this podcast. Tried to do podcast for every game, but I found that they're short podcasts, which is good, but I don't have the time to produce and edit as many as 16 podcasts. If there's 16 games, I got to do one for every game. And to fit those in I tried it, and it's a nice idea. And then I went to trying to review the games before and after, but I realized a lot of people do that. And I like the top 10s. That's just what I like. Now, it's not for everybody to know not everybody's interested in the top 10s for players, hearing about players from the past necessarily, something like that. But it's something I like. So this podcast is more of an endeavor to kind of take something that I was already looking at and just sharing it with those who are interested. Appreciate the subscribers that I have. And so I keep modifying it. I'm kind of in somewhere near what I like. I went from just video to audio, which was a nice plus. I'm trying to keep it down a little bit, the time on it, but find that hard to do. So anybody ever throw any suggestions, I'll listen to them. I have before, and anything that makes it better and still sticks within that framework of what I like to do is kind of where I'm heading. The other thing that I didn't want to do is because there's a lot of podcasts that do this, and I didn't just want to be another one that talks about players, that maybe they get in trouble for something and they spend an hour talking about that. It really is nothing there except that. And I like to just talk about the games, the numbers, and things like that. So that's kind of where I am on this podcast. So in that vein, we're going to talk about the Sunday night game and the Monday night game. And then we'll look at my power rankings for after week 17 going into this last week. There was some changes there. And then we'll take a look at the playoff scenarios. Man, there's some really good games. And the way the NFL does it is pretty interesting, the way they're going to do these games next week. So with that, let's start with the Chicago Bears versus San Francisco 49ers. This was in Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, California for the 49ers. They pull out the win, 42-38. Really close game, very fun game to watch. San Francisco just racked up a lot of points, and this shows for both teams, actually, because Chicago had 38. Offenses are good for the teams, but the defenses are lacking. And obviously for San Francisco, losing their two best defenders for the season surely didn't help them. But a very close game. All right, let's look at some of the stats in here. Wow. San Francisco, 32 first downs to Chicago's 26. That's a lot of first downs for both teams. Yardage-wise, Chicago, 440 net yards. San Francisco, 496. So there you go. Not a lot of defense in this game. Let's see what else we got here. Both of them really good in third down efficiency. 6 out of 12 for Chicago for 50%. Plus, they went for it on fourth twice and they made it. San Francisco was even better. 7 out of 10 on third down. That's 70%. And they went for it on fourth down once and made it. That's both of those are some of the best percentages I've seen. Time of possession, though, 33 and a half minutes for San Francisco, 26 and a half for Chicago. So San Francisco did have the ball a little bit more. Now, looking at the numbers here, both quarterbacks did fairly well. Caleb Williams, 25 completions on 42 attempts for 330 yards, 7.9 yards a pass attempt, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, was not sacked at all. Boy, I talked about this before, but man, Caleb Williams was sacked in the top 10 all time in the NFL last year, sacked 68 times. This year, they've just reduced that down to a third of what he had last year. It's been really one of the biggest improvements for him. Quarterback rating for him of 100.3. Now, Brock Purdy, good game for him. 24 completions on 33 attempts, so 1 less completion on 9 fewer attempts, 103 yards. That's 9.2 yards an attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was sacked only once, had a quarterback rating of 118.6. So both of them over 100. In the running game for Chicago, DeAndre Swift, 9 carries for 54 yards. That's 6 yards a pop. And 1 was for 22 yards and a touchdown. He had 2 touchdowns, in fact, DeAndre Swift did. Kyle Mononagay, 8 carries for 38 yards. That's 4.75. And then Caleb Williams, 5 for 18. So they ran the ball 22 times for 110 yards. That's 5 yards a pop. And kind of interesting, and I guess they just didn't run it as much. I mean, he threw the ball 42 times in this game, and they were never really that far out of it. I mean, even at halftime, it was 28-21 San Francisco, so it was still a close game. And then it was even tied up at 28 apiece. So why they didn't run it maybe more when obviously they were running it quite well, I'm not really sure. Now, for San Francisco, this was the biggest game for McCaffrey rushing-wise this year. 23 carries for 140 yards, 6.1 yards a carry. Had his longest run as well of the season, a 41-yard run, which was his longest by far this season. He had 1 touchdown rushing. Brock Purdy had 6 carries for 28 yards, and then Brian Robinson, 4 carries for 22 yards. They ran the ball even better, 34 carries. So this is kind of what I think Chicago might have wanted to do. But 34 carries for 200 yards for the 49ers at 5.9 yards a carry and 3 rushing touchdowns. Brock Purdy had 2 of them himself. Now, as far as receivers go, for Chicago, Luther Burden, he's finally starting to produce. Everybody's been waiting and waiting. He seems like a good player, but he had 8 catches for 138 yards, 35-yard touchdown pass included in that number. And then Colston Loveland, another young guy for them, 6 catches for 94 yards. He had a 36-yard touchdown pass. Pretty impressive there. And then Kyle Mononagay, 3 catches for 9 yards coming out of the backfield. DeAndre Swift had 2 catches for 25 yards. So Swift had 25 yards there and 54 yards. So he had 79 yards total offense for Chicago. DJ Moore, only 1 catch for 7 yards on 4 passes headed his way. It was Burden and Loveland who dominated in targets and receptions. No one else had more than 3, and that was Mononagay. And there, after that, it was spread around quite a bit. Now, for San Francisco, Jake Tongas had 7 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. Ricky Pearsall, 5 catches for 85 yards. Christian McCaffrey, 4 for 41. No touchdowns this time receiving. He's looking for one more touchdown, and he'll set the NFL record for running backs in receiving touchdowns. He just needs one more. And then Juwan Jennings, 2 catches for 42 yards. One of them was 38 yards, and that was a touchdown. So his other catch was only for 4 yards. And then the fullback for San Francisco, Kyle Juszczyk. Sorry if I'm butchering that name. He had 2 catches for 14 yards, and one was a touchdown. All right. That's the game. It was a really fun game to watch. Pretty close all the way. I enjoyed that game. I mean, it was Chicago jumped right out in the lead, but then San Francisco came back for a couple of touchdowns. I mean, by the end of the first quarter, it's already 14-14. You knew this was going to be a fun game to watch. Slowed down just slightly in the second half, but still a lot of points were scored, and entertaining game for two teams that, I don't have anything invested in really. All right, looking at some of the numbers, Chicago Bears passing yards this season. Caleb Williams now has 3,730 yards, which is good enough to move him from 6th spot all the way up to 3rd. He has a good chance to set the record for the most passing yards in a single season for the Chicago Bears. He only needs 109 yards to pass Eric Kramer, who set the record way back in 1995. The goal was, I know there was a goal that a Chicago Bear would finally throw for over 4,000 yards in a season. He would need 270 yards for that, which is not out of the realm of possibility, considering the fact that he just put up 330 yards on Sunday. So there's a chance still, but a much better chance that he sets the record. That all depends on if he's even playing. Some of these games we're going to talk about, there's a question on who's actually going to play, if it doesn't really affect their playoff status going into the, as far as that goes. Now, Caleb Williams also had 2 touchdowns. So this season now he has 25 passing touchdowns, which puts him now into 5th place all time in that category. Eric Kramer, the same year in 1995, when he had the record passing yards, also had 29 touchdowns, which is the record for the team. I think this might be one of the lowest. Every other team, I'm sure, has at least somebody who's thrown it 30 or more. So 25 touchdown passes now for Caleb Williams. What a really good year for him. This new coach has really gotten him on board, and he's really turned around. Looked a lot better this year. Still has, his second-year guy, still has some improvement. I mean, I think Drake May has looked even better, but still, these are 2 really good quarterbacks that we can expect to be watching for quite a long time. Now, for San Francisco, in this season, rushing touchdowns, Christian McCaffrey had 1 rushing touchdown. He now has 10 for the season, which ties him with 7 other players for second all-time in rushing touchdowns for San Francisco. This was a number I was kind of astonished by. Christian McCaffrey holds the record with 14. That's a fairly low number, which he set in 2023. After that, from 2nd all the way to 9th, it's 10. That's the next best, is 10 rushing touchdowns in a season. I find that incredible, honestly, that it's only 10. For a team that's been around for a long time. I mean, Joe Perry from 1948 is on this list with 10 rushing touchdowns. That's amazing that no one's had even 11. It's either 14 or 10. That's it. And this goes for this category as well. Christian McCaffrey, this is why he's such a great player. This is in receptions. So he had 10 rushing touchdowns, and now he's got 96 receptions on the season, which is good enough to put him into 7th all-time in receptions for the San Francisco 49ers. Jerry Rice holds 5 of the top 6 spots, but what's amazing about that is his best year ever was 122. He's got by far the most receptions in the NFL, and yet He only had 4 seasons in his entire career where he had 100 or more receptions, and one of those was exactly 100. It was just the consistency and he played for a long time. Very few players played as many years as he did to get to that record that he holds. So Christian McCaffrey with 96 receptions now is 7th all time. Boy, he's kind of slowed down on the receptions, but he only needs 4 to hit the 100 mark. So that he would be the 6th time a receiver or a person has had 100 or more receptions for the 49ers. Also, Christian McCaffrey, running backs, this is an NFL record now. Christian McCaffrey, with those 96 receptions, is in 8th place all time as far as receptions in a single season by a running back. So 6 times it's happened that a player's had 100 receptions, and Christian McCaffrey's done that twice. He's the only player in NFL history, as far as running backs go, to have 2 seasons with 100 or more receptions. He holds the record with 116, which he did with the Carolina Panthers back in 2019. So he won't break that record, but he could make it to 100, as I was saying, to be the only player with 3 times having 100 or more receptions. He's had quite a season. And, everybody, if you were into fantasy, you were so worried about his health. He's played the entire season, unlike, a lot of other players. Now, looking at the career of Brock Purdy, for his career, he now has 84 passing touchdowns, which moves him into 7th all-time in passing touchdowns for the San Francisco 49ers. He passed Jimmy Garoppolo, who had 82. Next up will be Y.A. Tittle. You'll have to catch him next season. The great Hall of Famer Y.A. Tittle had 108 back in the 50s. Now, Christian McCaffrey going, like I said, I'm just amazed by this player. This is going back to rushing yards for his career with the San Francisco 49ers. He came into the season, this game in 12th spot, but he had 140 yards, which was good enough to jump him up into 9th place all-time in rushing yards for the San Francisco 49ers. He passed Steve Young, really Hall of Fame quarterback for the 49ers, played in the 80s and all the 90s. So now Christian McCaffrey has 3,586 rushing yards, good enough for 8th all-time for the San Francisco 49ers. All right, that is why I could not do this game and the next game, because the amount of stats that were generated by, like I said, Williams and McCaffrey. And the same goes for our next game. The LA Rams go to Atlanta, and they need a win, and they don't get it. Atlanta beats the Rams 27-24, due primarily to a multitude of errors by the Rams. And it was not a good game, really, for Matthew Stafford. Probably one of his worst when he's in a MVP race with Drake May. I think Josh Allen was up there, but he had a bad game as well. So Drake May did not. He had a super excellent game. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, had a quarterback rating, I think it was 157. He really put on a show. Now, you got to grant that it was against the Jets, but still, it did not hurt his chances, probably improved him. So we got a close race between these two players. And the thing is, I don't know, and some of these teams aren't going to tell us who's going to play this final week. It really depends on if they can make a move in the standings. And if they can't improve their lot in the standings for the playoffs, they may sit some players just for their health. So we'll have to see what happens. But, man, the Rams have a problem here. A couple of them. One is the Rams a few weeks ago went to Carolina. So that's a cross-country trip, and they lost the Carolina Panthers. That was their first bad loss. Then they have to go this week, last Sunday, to Atlanta, cross-country trip again. They lose that one. Atlanta has a decent defense, but seriously, 27-24, the Rams lose it. And it's really just tipped them from being the number one seed in the NFL on NFC side to just a playoff team right now. And they're not going to get out of the playoffs, but still, it's just been kind of something interesting to see. So in this game, it was a close game. Rams tried to come back, but they ended up not being able to quite catch the Falcons in this game. I mean, they were down 20 they were down 24-3, and they came back. Stafford touchdown pass, and then so it was 24-10, and the Falcons were going to kick a field goal, gets blocked. Jared Verse runs it back for 76 yards. All of a sudden, it's 24-17, and this game flipped just that fast. And Puka Nacua gets a touchdown pass. It's 24-24. But with only half a minute to go, even less than that, the 49ers kick a 51-yard field goal to win at 27-24. And then the Stafford, I didn't understand the whole. They had 26 seconds left. They had 3 timeouts. I'm talking about the Rams here. And all 4 plays. Stafford throws it deep. There was no attempt, I thought, to try to get within field goal range. They started at the 40-yard line because they kicked it out of the end zone, 35 or 40. But either way, they were not that far. They needed, 20, 25 yards, but they had the timeouts as well. And I just didn't understand. Every pass was deep down the field, which just took time, and they weren't completed either. I don't know if they were hoping for a catch or a personal, pass interference or something, but so they ended up running out of time. They couldn't kick a field goal. They were too far away. And I just didn't really understand it, not going for the field goal and at least trying to get that versus just as deep passes he kept throwing. Anyway, the Rams lose this game. Now, looking at the numbers, it was really close. Net yards, 363 for the Rams, 345 for Atlanta. The biggest difference here is where the yards came from, and we'll look at that in a second. This game also, both teams identical. Third down efficiency, 5 of 13 for the Rams for 38%, 5 of 13 for the Falcons for 38%. Now, the big difference is on fourth down, Atlanta did not ever go for it on fourth down. The Rams did 4 times they went for it on fourth down, but only made it 1 time. Time of possession was almost the same, only 30 seconds difference between them in time of possession as well. All right, let's look at the quarterbacks, and this is where you would have thought these numbers would be flipped. Kirk Cousins had a much better passer rating than Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, 22 completions on 38 attempts for 269 yards. That's 7 yards an attempt. He had 2 touchdown passes, so he's really been excellent there, but he had 3 interceptions in this game. Really not good at all. 3 sacks, had a quarterback rating of 64.5, and I didn't look, but I would dare say that that's probably one of his lowest, if not his lowest, quarterback rating of the season. And then Kirk Cousins only threw the ball 20 times, had only 13 completions for 126 yards. That's 6.3 yards an attempt, though. Had 1 touchdown, no interceptions, was not sacked in this game. That's amazing. But it's because he only was going back for a pass 20 times. He had a quarterback rating of 99.2. All right, let's look at the rushing, and this is where the difference was in this game as far as the Rams go. For the Rams, as far as the Falcons go, but for the Rams, Kyren Williams, 13 carries, 92 yards, really good running there. over 7 yards a carry. He really led the team. Now for Atlanta, Bijan Robinson, 22 carries for 195 yards, One was a 93-yard touchdown. He was incredible. Watching him make moves, he was something else. So 93 yards touchdown run. You take that out of there, even with it out, he had 21 carries for 102 yards. Still really good. Really a great game. Tyler Algier had 10 carries for 23 yards, so 2.3. But this was a difference. While Stafford had 269 yards passing and Kirk Cousins only had 126, on the reverse side, the Rams only had 115 yards rushing to 219 yards rushing for the Falcons. So the numbers were similar as far as total yards. It's just the way they got them was very different. Now for the Rams, Falcons did a pretty good job on Puka Nacua. They tried to get the ball to him 10 times. He only had 5 catches for 47 yards. One was an 11-yard touchdown. Man, he had an incredible, on that last 26 seconds, they had to review it over and over. They finally took it away. He had an incredible catch as he's going out of bounds. It looked like he had his feet in and that he caught it with one hand. But on one replay angle, you see the ball kind of separate from his arm as he's hitting the ground. They called it incomplete pass. It was that close. It took him a few minutes to figure that out, whether he had caught it or not. But it was an incredible effort. Just amazing. They called it incomplete initially, and but then it looked like it was a reception. And they even the on-air referee guy that they will talk to said it was, until they showed that one angle only gave you the impression that it was not a complete pass. Now for Rams also, Colby Parkinson actually led in receptions with 6 for 53 yards. Puka Nacua had the touchdown, as I said. Terrence Ferguson, 2 catches for 54 yards. 1 was a touchdown. Now for the Falcons, Bijan Robinson, 5 catches for 34 yards to lead the team in receptions. He was targeted 8 times, the most times. Now, he had 34 yards plus 195. He had 229 yards of offense for the Falcons. 229 yards out of their 345. So he was the man. He's been impressive. He's leading the NFL, I believe, in scrimmage yards too. Overtook Taylor, who was there for a while, and also overtook Christian McCaffrey. All right, let's look at some of the other numbers. That was a fun game to watch too. It didn't look like it at first when the game was 24-3, 21-0 at halftime, all Atlanta. And then when the Rams started coming back, it really got entertaining. All right, now for the season for the Rams, Matthew Stafford had 269 yards passing. He now has 4,448 yards, which is good enough to put him into 5th all-time in passing yards for the Los Angeles Rams. Next up for him is a couple of Jared Goff seasons. If he plays, and if he definitely has a chance to pass him if he does play. Also, Matthew Stafford for the Rams, passing touchdowns this season. He now has 42, which sets the record that he held with Kurt Warner at 41. Kurt Warner in 1999 had 41 passing touchdowns, and Matthew Stafford in 2021 had 41 touchdowns in a season. So now Matthew Stafford has the number 1 spot with 42 passing touchdowns in a single season for the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Puka Nacua had 5 receptions. He now has 119 receptions for the Rams this season, which is good enough to tie him with Isaac Bruce, who did it in 1995 for 2nd all-time in that category. Cooper Kupp has the 2nd best reception record in history of the NFL with 145, holds the number 1 spot. He did that in 2021, the same year that Stafford was throwing for all the yards and for all those touchdowns in his previous record. Too bad those were all these stats for Stafford are in a loss, versus McCaffrey, who had him in a win. Another record for Stafford. This is in passing yards in a career, and this is in the NFL. Top 10 NFL career passing yards. Matthew Stafford passed Ben Roethlisberger. So Matthew Stafford is now in sixth spot all time in passing yards with 64,257. Like I said, he passed Ben Roethlisberger. Now, next up for him is Aaron Rodgers, who is in fifth. Stafford's going to have to play another year. If he does, he will definitely pass him. He's about 1,700 yards behind right now, but that would easily be something he could do next year. Philip Rivers, he wrapped up his career. He'll end up in eighth spot all time in passing yards in NFL history with 63,984. What's kind of interesting, going into this game on Sunday, Philip Rivers and Stafford were only well, actually, that's not true. They were, after Philip Rivers had played on Sunday, he was only 4 yards behind Stafford, but then on Monday, Stafford had 269 yards to move farther ahead of him. Great careers. It's pretty amazing that on this list, you have 3 players who are in the top 10 all time in career passing yards playing right now at the same time. Of course, that's only because Philip Rivers came out of retirement, but still, it's pretty impressive. Not as impressive if you go back just 5 years when you had Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Ben Roethlisberger, Philip Rivers, Matt Ryan, all playing at the same time. 7 of the top 10 playing at the exact same time. That's something. All right. Now, also Matthew Stafford in career passing touchdowns. He had 2 more. He's now got 419. He also passed Ben Roethlisberger in this category. So Matthew Stafford now with 419 passing touchdowns is in 8th spot all time in that category. In the NFL history, that is. All right, for Atlanta, Bijan Robinson. He came into this game in rushing yards with 1,250, which was good enough for 13th in Falcons history. With 195, he now has 1,445, which is good enough to jump him from 13th all the way up into 7th spot all time in rushing yards for the Atlanta Falcons in a single season. Another, Bijan Robinson. He had 1 touchdown. He's got 25 now, which puts him into a tie with Haskell Stanback, who did it in the 70s. That he had 25. So he's tied for 8th spot all time in rushing touchdowns for the Atlanta Falcons in his career. He's really had a pretty decent season. Now in receptions, you got 2 players here. Drake London, already in the top 10 in receptions in a single season. Well, in his career for the Atlanta Falcons. He only had 1 reception in this game. He's now got 305, which is good enough to time with Jim Mitchell for 8th spot all time in that category. Now, Kyle Pitts just needed 1 reception to tie William Andrews for 10th spot to make it into the top 10. He had 2 receptions, so he now has 278, which is good enough to put him into 10th all-time in receptions for the Atlanta Falcons. So now you have Drake London at 9th and Kyle Pitts at 10th in receptions in their careers with the Atlanta Falcons. So good for them. Hopefully they have a good year next year. I don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be like, but you get those 2 back. You got Robinson. And I don't know about Pitts coming back. That'll be an interesting play there as well. And we'll see. But they have an opportunity, I think, to have a pretty decent offense. All right. That's the 2 games. And you see why it took me 35 minutes to just talk, or 30 minutes to talk about those 2 games. So many stats. So let's look at the power rankings now. Let's go through that bottom to top. All right. Number 10. Let's see. I dropped the Los Angeles Rams out of the top 10, believe it or not. I had them at number 1 for a few weeks, and I dropped them out. Dropped them out because they have 5 losses, and 2 of them are against the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. You just can't lose to those types of teams, I don't think, and stay in the top 10. Now, if I could be wrong. Maybe the Rams, they get Devontae Adams back for the playoffs, and they're a whole new team. It opens up Puka Nacua a little bit more. I don't know, but their defense is questionable as well. So number 10, Buffalo Bills, I dropped them too. I almost dropped them out, but they lost, to the Eagles in a tight game. Eagles obviously are one of the better teams in the NFL. So I didn't consider that loss on par, with the losses that the Rams have put up. So Buffalo Bills, number 10, they drop a couple of spots. Chicago Bears are number 9. I dropped them down a couple of spots after their loss to the 49ers. And it was a close game, but they did lose. They now have 5 losses. All right. They play Detroit. So but Detroit's out of this now. So we'll see what happens there. The Buffalo Bills play the Jets. So you expect, depending on what happens even if Josh Allen doesn't play, I pretty much expect the Buffalo Bills to win that game. Now, at number 8, Los Angeles Chargers, I dropped them a couple of spots as well. They lost to the Houston Texans. But again, with 5 losses, that was a good team. That was another team that was on the top 10 list. So, I kept them in the top 10. I had to pick between the Chargers, the Bears, the Bills, and the Rams as far as who was going to drop out of this top 10 list. One of them had to go. Ended up with the Rams dropping out. Now, the Chargers play Denver, but the Chargers have already said they're not playing their quarterback and maybe some other players, so it looks like probably an easy win for Denver. Now, at number 7, and first time on the list, is the Philadelphia Eagles. They appear at number 7. They kind of jumped up there. They're 11-5 as well, but they beat the Buffalo Bills, and so I put them up there ahead of the Bills and some of these other teams that had lost. So Philadelphia Eagles at number 7. They play the Washington Commanders, so that's a chance for a win there. At home they play. Number 6, the Houston Texans. They moved up 3 spots. They are number 6. They play the Indianapolis Colts. And that could be an interesting game. And they put the pressure on the Jaguars, who cannot afford to lose themselves. If they do, Houston Texans would take over first spot. They would move into having home games in the playoffs versus the Jaguars. So this is a big game for the Jaguars and the Houston Texans. They both want to win. I mean, the Jaguars to maintain that playoff game at home option versus not having to go on the road and play a playoff game. So Houston Texans, number 6. Denver Broncos are number 5. They played Kansas City. They handled them. They play the Chargers. And as I said, the Chargers are already planning on setting some players. Denver Broncos are 13-3, so they probably win. San Francisco 49ers, I put it number 4. Primarily, they're 12-4. So despite, this has been a fun team to watch in a way, losing 2 of their best defensive players, and then the way their offense had to juggle as far as receivers go last year, this whole past season, especially early on in the year, and yet they still come out at 12-4. And they've won some big games. They've lost some games as well, but they did beat the Chicago Bears, one of the better teams. So got them at number 4. Jacksonville Jaguars at number 3. They're 12-4. They beat the Indianapolis Colts. It was a tough game. They came from behind 10. They were down 10-0, but they came back and won at 23-17. They're number 3, 12-4, tied for the 3rd best record in the NFL. They play Tennessee, a game they should win. It's at home. They should win it. They're also still a team that has a slight chance to be the number 1 overall team in the AFC. Now, they need a Denver loss, and they need a Patriots loss. The Denver one is unlikely because the Chargers sound like they're going to bench some players, so unfortunately, that may not happen. But they do have a chance to move up to maybe number 2 if the Broncos or one of the two teams, Broncos or Patriots, lose. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I got the Jaguars at number 3. Number 2, New England Patriots at number 2. They play Miami. It could be a tough game. They're playing at home, though. And if it's cold, it should be a nice, easy win for the Patriots. The Miami Dolphins do not like cold weather. And at number 1 again, the Seattle Seahawks. They did what the Rams could not do. They went to Carolina, and they beat Carolina handily. It was a close game, actually. The first half, it was a very close game, but a miscue, and then this or that, and all of a sudden Seattle wins this game. But they did what the Rams should have done when they went to Carolina. So I got Seattle Seahawks at number 1, and the Patriots at number 2. They stay the same. All right, that's a look at my top 10. Now, let's look at the playoff scenario here. Denver Broncos for the AFC, and then we'll wrap this up. They can clinch the number 1 seed and home field advantage just by winning. They just need to win. Otherwise, they need a loss. They need both New England and Jacksonville to lose. So they got to win this game, and it sounds like the Chargers are going to give them that win. Now, for the Patriots, they've got to win, but they also need Denver to lose. So that's what they're looking at. Same with the Jaguars. They could clinch number 1 spot in the AFC, but they need both Denver and New England to lose. That's a much more difficult thing to happen. Now, what's cool about this is that also for the Jaguars, they clinched the AFC South, just their own division, with a win or a tie, or a Houston loss or tie by Houston. Now, what I like that the NFL does is they put these games on at the same time. So the Jaguars game against Tennessee is at 1 o'clock, as is the Houston-Indianapolis game at 1 o'clock. So they'll be playing at the same time, so no one has an advantage as to knowing what the other team did by playing at different times. So I'll be watching those games simultaneously to see how that goes. I just hope the Jaguars win. Obviously, as a fan of that team, then it doesn't matter what Houston does. For Pittsburgh Steelers, all they have is to win their division, the AFC North. They need a win or a tie. They are in a win or a tie. They're playing the Baltimore Ravens. Same thing goes almost for the Baltimore Ravens. They have to win the game against the Steelers if they want to make the playoffs. Now, as I said, for the Houston Texans, who are the 5th seed right now in the playoffs, so they're the first wild card team, they need to beat the Jags. They need to beat the Colts, and they need Jacksonville to lose. So that's what they're looking at. Now, the Chargers, they're in the 6th spot in the playoffs, and this may be why they're benching players. They're already locked into a wild card. They can't win their division. They're not going to drop out of the playoffs. So the worst that can happen is they lose and they move down to the 7th spot. And that would be if they lose and the Bills win. So they could move into the 7th spot in the playoffs. So I guess they're figuring, what does it matter if they're 6th or 5th? And they could move actually up into 5th if Houston was to lose and the Chargers were to win. So all they're talking about is where they're going to be in the playoff place as a wild card team. Buffalo Bills, pretty much the same thing. With a win, they could move up into 6th, even in the 5th spot as far as the seeding goes, if they were to win and those other two wild card teams, the Chargers and Houston, were to lose. So that's the best they're going to do. They cannot win their division either, and they can't drop out of the playoffs. So it's pretty much set who's in the playoffs, except for the division winner of the AFC North, which will be the Ravens or the Steelers. That's the only ones. Now in the NFC, Seattle Seahawks, all they need to do is beat the 49ers on Saturday, and they win the number 1 seed. And this is going to be the biggest game. This is on Saturday too. And they win the NFC West as well. If they lose to the 49ers, though, they would be dropped from 1st seed to number 5 seed, and they'd have to be a wild card team. And the 49ers would win their division. That's crazy. That's the only division where you have such a, well, actually Houston, but they're not playing each other. Houston and Jaguars, they're not playing each other. But there's a chance that the Jaguars fall from division winner to playoff wild card team. Now for the Chicago Bears, they've already they'll lock up either, they can't win the number 1 seed. It's either going to be Seattle or the 49ers. But the Chicago Bears are either going to be the number 2 or 3 seed in the NFC playoffs. So they're going to have a home game regardless of what happens. But if they beat the Lions on Sunday, they'll be the number 2 seed. If they lose and the Eagles win or tie, then the Bears will drop to number 3 seed. That's as far as they're going to go. So it makes you wonder if they'll even play players. Does it matter to them that much if they're the 2 or 3 seed? I don't know. Now the Eagles, they can go to, like I said, to the number 2 slot, but they need a win and they need the Bears to lose. All right, Carolina Panthers. Well, their catches, they can win the NFC South with a win or a tie against the Buccaneers, and they play each other. So there's another game that's really a key game. But this is, again, just identical to the Steelers Ravens game. The winner is in the playoffs. The loser's not in the playoffs. It's no other scenario for them. Now, the 49ers, this is a big one. They're the 5th seed, number 1 wild card spot. They're the 5th seed in the playoffs, but they can be the number 1 seed if they can beat the Seahawks on Saturday night. That's a huge game. So they're either going to be the number 1 seed. They could even drop to the number 6 seed if they were to lose to Seattle, and a couple other scenarios here. But we'll have to see. But they're in the playoffs, but there's no other match here where you can be number 1 seed or as far down as number 6 seed. It's pretty interesting. Now, the Rams, and back to the 49ers, it depends on if the Rams win and the 49ers lose, then they could drop possibly down to number 6 seed, the 49ers, and the Rams could move up to number 5 seed. They cannot win the division anymore. A division they had a stranglehold on for a little while, or at least the lead, and now they can't even win it anymore. Green Bay Packers, number 7 seed, and they're just locked into that position. That's why I don't see them playing anybody probably for their game. They're just either going to play the Bears or the Eagles. It really, to them, they don't know. They can't control that. So there's not much point for them to play some of their players that might be hurting somewhat. Now, like I said, the only wild card team the only team that's not in this top 7 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the only way they can get in is to beat the Carolina Panthers and take over that NFC South slot as the winner of that division. So that's a look at the wild card teams, the playoff teams. What a fun weekend we have. No games on Thursday, only Saturday and Sunday. No Monday night game either, because we're heading into the playoffs after this weekend. But man, there's going to be some fun games to watch. Obviously, the main ones will be on regular TV, but I'll be trying to watch all of them. All right, I appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe or comment on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. You'll find my podcast there. All the charts that I'm talking about, that kind of thing, all be posted there. And I appreciate you listening. This is the final podcast of 2025. How amazing is that? Next one, I'll be talking, which will be before the games. It'll be on Friday, but that'll be January 2nd already. Wow. Of 2026. But I'll be talking about the season numbers, some of these players, where they stand on their teams, the NFL, and do they have a chance to set records in their team or in the NFL as a whole? So we'll be looking at who are the top players in the NFL going into the last game of the season. We'll be doing that on Friday. All right. Appreciate you listening. I hope you have a happy, safe New Year. And I will talk to you again on Friday. So for NFL Top 10s for Wednesday, I'm out. See you on Friday.